November 23, 1943. 5:47 hours. Bougainville Island, Northern Solomon Islands. Private first class. Michael Cordero, 23 years old, presses himself against the wet volcanic soil behind a fallen mahogany tree. His M1 Garand feels slick in his hands, not from the morning rain, but from sweat cutting through the coral dust on his palms. 40 yards ahead, through the pre-dawn darkness, he can hear them. Japanese soldiers fortifying a machine gun position in a natural cave formation. He's counted at least 8 voices, maybe more. His platoon had been tasked with taking this ridge before sunrise. The problem, that cave sits 20 feet up a sheer rock face, protected by jungle so thick that mortar rounds detonate in the canopy without ever reaching the ground. They'd already lost 2 men trying to get grenades close enough. The regular fragmentation grenades, the MK2 pineapples clipped to his belt, have a throwing range of maybe 35 yards. The cave is 40 yards away and 20 feet up. The math doesn't work. Cordero reaches into his ammunition pouch, but this time he doesn't pull out an 8-round en-bloc clip. His fingers close around something else, something his supply sergeant had pressed into his hands the previous evening with specific instructions and very little explanation. "Don't fire more than one every 10 minutes, the sergeant had said, "and for God's sake, don't hold it like a regular rifle when you do." The shape is unmistakable. A rifle grenade. But this one is different from anything Cordero has seen before. The Pacific theater of World War II presented American forces with a problem that no amount of training at Camp Pendleton or Fort Benning could have prepared them for. By late 1943, U.S. Marine and Army divisions were island hopping through some of the most hostile terrain on Earth, facing an enemy that had turned every cave, every coral ridge, every jungle hillside into a fortress. The Japanese defensive strategy relied on 3 elements: concealment, elevation, and distance. They built machine gun nests and artillery positions into natural cave systems, often 15 to 30 feet above ground level. These positions were carefully sited to provide overlapping fields of fire while remaining invisible to advancing troops until it was too late. On islands like Tarawa, Peleliu, and Bougainville, these fortifications inflicted casualty rates that shocked commanders back in Washington. Standard American infantry weapons of 1943 couldn't effectively engage these elevated, hardened positions. The M1 Garand rifle, revolutionary as it was, fired a .30-06 Springfield round, designed for anti-personnel work at ranges of 500 yards or less against visible targets. The Browning automatic rifle provided suppressive fire but couldn't penetrate coral or volcanic rock. The M1 carbine, issued to officers and specialists, was even less effective against fortifications. Hand grenades required soldiers to close to within 35 yards, suicidal against a prepared defensive position. The MK2 fragmentation grenade, effective as it was, weighed 21 ounces and had a casualty radius of about 15 yards. But getting that grenade to its target meant exposing yourself to concentrated machine gun fire during the throwing motion. On Tarawa alone, November 20th, 1943, Marines suffered 3,407 casualties across 76 hours of fighting. Field reports consistently identified the same problem: inability to suppress or destroy elevated defensive positions without unacceptable losses. Mortars offered indirect fire, but proved frustratingly ineffective in jungle terrain. The standard 60mm M2 mortar could lob high explosive rounds in a high arc, but Pacific Island jungles had canopy layers, sometimes exceeding 120 feet in height. Rounds detonated in the trees, shredding vegetation, but leaving the enemy positions untouched. Bringing up heavier weapons, the 80mm mortars or 105mm pack howitzers required cleared approaches that didn't exist in primary jungle. The Army's Chief of Ordnance had understood this problem since early 1942, when after-action reports from Guadalcanal began stacking up on desks in Washington. What American infantry needed was a man-portable weapon system that could deliver explosive force at extended ranges against point targets, something with more reach than a hand grenade, more precision than a mortar, and more portability than crew-served weapons. The solution existed, in theory. Rifle grenades, explosive projectiles launched from the muzzle of a standard infantry rifle, had been used extensively in World War I by French, British, and German forces. The French Vivian Bessières rifle grenade and the British Mills bomb rifle attachment had proven the concept. By attaching a launching adapter to a rifle and using a special blank cartridge or a standard round with the bullet removed, a soldier could theoretically launch a grenade 150 to 200 yards with reasonable accuracy. But the M1 Garand presented unique engineering challenges. Unlike the bolt-action rifles of the previous war, the Garand was a semi-automatic weapon with a complex gas-operated reloading system. The gas system relied on a specific pressure curve from the 30 .06 cartridge firing through an unobstructed barrel. Launching a rifle grenade would fundamentally alter this pressure curve, potentially damaging the rifle's operating rod or even causing catastrophic failure. By mid-1943, the Ordnance Department had tested 17 different rifle grenade designs, all with mixed results. The M7 grenade launcher, a spigot-type device that fit over the M1 Garand's flash suppressor, had been approved for limited production in May 1943. But the critical component remained in development. A grenade round specifically engineered to work with the Garand's gas system without destroying the rifle or killing the operator. That component arrived at forward supply depots in the Southwest Pacific in October 1943. It was designated the M9A1 anti-tank rifle grenade, though soldiers would quickly give it other names. The Japanese, encountering it for the first time in November 1943, would call it something else entirely. If you want to see how American ingenuity turned the M1 Garand into a weapon system the Japanese never planned for, hit that like button and subscribe for more forgotten weapons of World War II. Back to Private First Class Cordero, pressed against that volcanic soil as dawn approaches. The object Cordero pulls from his ammunition pouch weighs 21 ounces, exactly the same as a MK2 hand grenade, but it's shaped like nothing he's carried before. The M9A1 rifle grenade is 14 inches long, roughly the length from his elbow to his fingertips. The body is a hollow steel cylinder, 2.36 inches in diameter, painted olive drab with yellow markings that read M9A1AT in stenciled letters. The design is elegant in its simplicity, which is precisely what makes it dangerous if mishandled. The front end, the business end, contains 4.2 ounces of TNT in a shaped charge configuration. This isn't the fragmentation charge of a standard grenade. It's designed to concentrate explosive force in a single direction, penetrating armor plate up to 2 inches thick, or creating a devastating pressure wave inside enclosed spaces. Behind the explosive charge sits a base detonating fuse that arms itself after the grenade travels approximately 20 yards through the air. The rear section contains the launcher assembly, a hollow steel tube that slides over the M1 Garands flash suppressor and grenade launcher attachment. Inside this tube, a carefully engineered gas bleed system solves the critical problem that plagued earlier designs. When fired, combustion gases from the rifle cartridge expand into the tube, but a series of precisely angled ports allow controlled venting of excess pressure. This venting prevents the catastrophic overpressure that would shear the Garands operating rod while still providing enough force to launch the grenade. The M7 grenade launcher, the attachment permanently fixed to Cordero's rifle, adds another 6 ounces to the weapon's weight. It's a tubular steel device that clamps over the rifle's flash suppressor and locks into place with a spring-loaded collar. 4 stabilizing fins fold against the launcher when not in use, deploying automatically as the grenade leaves the muzzle to provide gyroscopic stability in flight. To fire the M9A1, a soldier must follow a precise procedure that Cordero had drilled exactly 3 times during a hurried training session the previous afternoon. First, rotate the Garand's rear sight to the grenade launcher position, a special elevation setting marked G that angles the barrel upward at approximately 45 degrees for maximum range. Second, slide the M9A1 onto the launcher until it seats with an audible click against the locking collar. Third, and this is where men could get killed, brace the rifle butt against the ground, not the shoulder. That last point had been emphasized repeatedly. The recoil generated by launching a 21-ounce projectile from a rifle designed for 150-grain bullets is tremendous. Firing with the butt against your shoulder could result in a broken collarbone, dislocated shoulder, or severe bruising. The proper firing position required kneeling or standing with the rifle butt braced against the ground at a slight angle, one hand gripping the stock for stability, the other reaching forward to pull the trigger. The propellant was a standard M1 30-06 cartridge, no special blanks required, though regulations specified that only ball ammunition should be used, never armor-piercing or tracer rounds which could generate excessive pressure. Upon firing, the bullet engages the grenade, transferring its kinetic energy before exiting through the ports in the grenade's tail section. The expanding gases then propel the grenade forward at an initial velocity of approximately 260 feet per second. Maximum effective range varied based on the launch angle, but averaged 195 yards, with the sight set to G position. Maximum range could exceed 350 yards, though accuracy became problematic beyond 200 yards due to the grenade's relatively poor ballistic coefficient. The shaped charge could penetrate 2 inches of armor plate at 90 degrees angle of impact, or create an overpressure wave inside a cave or bunker sufficient to kill or incapacitate personnel within a 20-foot radius. Supply officers had delivered the M9A1 grenades to frontline units with specific warnings. The shaped charge was directional. It had to impact nose first to be effective. The fuse required at least 20 yards of travel to arm, meaning a short shot could result in a dud landing in friendly positions. And most critically, the thermal stress of firing more than 1 grenade every 10 minutes could warp the Garand's barrel or damage the gas system. Cordero's supply sergeant had issued him 3 M9A1 grenades, 3 chances to solve a problem that had already cost 2 men their lives. 5:51 hours. Cordero can see the cave entrance now as the first gray light of dawn filters through the jungle canopy. The opening is roughly 6 feet wide, set into a basalt outcropping that rises vertically from the jungle floor. Vines and vegetation partially conceal it, but he can make out sandbags stacked inside and the distinctive profile of a Type 92 heavy machine gun pointed down the approach trail. He signals his squad leader, Sergeant James Kowalski, 28, from Buffalo, New York. Kowalski low crawls to Cordero's position, carrying his own M1 with an M7 launcher attached. Between them, they have 5 M9A1 grenades. The plan is simple because it has to be. There's no room for complexity when you're introducing untested weapons into combat. Cordero will fire first. If the grenade fails to detonate, or if the shaped charge proves ineffective, Kowalski will follow up with a second shot while Cordero reloads. The rest of the squad, 6 men, will provide covering fire with their Garands and 1 bar, suppressing any Japanese positions that reveal themselves. 5:53 hours. Cordero removes 1 M9A1 from his ammunition pouch. The metal is cool against his palm despite the tropical humidity. He performs the loading procedure exactly as practiced. Rotate the sight to G. Slide the grenade onto the launcher until it clicks. Verify the fins are folded properly. The grenade adds significant weight to the rifle's forward balance. It feels wrong, top-heavy, like trying to aim a sledgehammer. He braces the rifle butt against the volcanic soil, angling it toward the cave entrance. The geometry is tricky. He's estimating 40 yards of horizontal distance, plus 20 feet of vertical elevation. The trajectory will arc the grenade upward and forward. He adjusts the rifle angle slightly, trying to visualize the parabolic path. His right hand finds the trigger. The metal is slick. He can hear his own breathing, louder than it should be. 5:04 hours. Cordero pulls the trigger. The detonation is different from a standard rifle shot, sharper with a deeper concussive element. The rifle butt punches into the ground, the stock flexing under stress. Cordero watches the grenade arc upward, tumbling slightly, the fins deploying mid-flight with a sound like a playing card in bicycle spokes. For a moment, maybe 2 seconds, nothing happens. The grenade disappears into the darkness of the cave entrance. Then the world compresses. The shaped charge detonates with a sound unlike anything Cordero has heard in 7 months of combat. Not the sharp crack of a grenade or the whump of a mortar, but a deeper, harder explosion that seems to punch through air itself. The pressure wave blows vegetation outward from the cave mouth. A gout of flame erupts from the entrance, followed immediately by thick gray smoke. Silence. Complete silence for 3 full seconds. Then screaming, high-pitched, sustained, terrible screaming from inside the cave. Cordero can see movement in the smoke, figures stumbling, falling. The Type 92 machine gun is silent. 1 Japanese soldier emerges from the smoke, his uniform burning, and collapses 10 feet from the entrance. Kowalski is already loading his second M9A1. The Japanese have other positions on this ridge, and they've just learned their cave isn't safe anymore. 5:56 hours. Second grenade away. This one targets a firing slit 30 yards to the left, where rifle fire had originated during the previous night's probing attacks. The M9A1 impacts directly on the coral face beside the slit. The shaped charge punches through 18 inches of coral and detonates inside. Cordero sees the explosion's flash through multiple cracks in the coral face, the pressure finding every weakness, every fissure. No return fire from that position. Over the next 17 minutes, Cordero's squad fires 4 more M9A1 grenades, 3 direct hits, 1 miss that detonates harmlessly in the jungle canopy. By 6:12 hours, the ridge is secure. Total American casualties, 0. Japanese casualties, 17 confirmed dead, based on body count conducted after the position was overrun. The Type 92 machine gun is destroyed, its receiver cracked by overpressure. The ammunition stored in the cave had cooked off from the heat, creating secondary explosions that collapsed part of the cave roof. After-action reports would later note that the entire engagement, from first grenade launch to securing the position, lasted 21 minutes. Previous attempts to take similar positions on Bougainville had required hours of costly frontal assault or calling in destroyer fire support when available. The M9A1 rifle grenade had compressed that timeline by a factor of 10 and reduced casualties by a factor of infinite. By 7 hours, runners were already carrying word back to battalion headquarters. By 14 SURE hours, every rifle company in the division was requesting M9A1 grenades. By November 25th, supply officers were reporting shortages as frontline units hoarded every round they could acquire. The M9A1 rifle grenade entered full-scale production in September 1943 at the Lake City Army Ammunition Plant in Independence, Missouri. Initial production targets called for 50,000 units per month, but by December 1943, following field reports from Bougainville, that target was revised upward to 175,000 units per month. Total wartime production would eventually reach 4.2 million M9A1 grenades by August 1945. But production numbers told only part of the story. The logistics of getting rifle grenades from Missouri to frontline positions in the Southwest Pacific involved a supply chain that stretched across 7,000 miles of ocean. Each M9A1 required careful handling. The shaped charge made them sensitive to impact, and tropical heat could degrade the explosive over time. They were shipped in wooden crates of 12 grenades each, packed in sawdust and cosmoline, with strict instructions to store below 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Reality, of course, ignored such instructions. On Bougainville, Peleliu, and later Luzon, temperatures inside supply tents regularly exceeded 30 degrees. Ammunition handlers learned to rotate stock frequently and test-fire grenades that had been in theater for more than 60 days. Approximately 8% of M9A1 grenades failed to detonate on impact, a higher diode rate than the 3% specification, almost certainly due to heat exposure degrading the fuse mechanisms. The M7 grenade launcher proved more reliable, though it added a permanent 6 ounces to every M1 Garands weight. By January 1944, the Ordnance Department had mandated that all M1 Garands issued in the Pacific Theater be fitted with M7 launchers as standard equipment. This modification program eventually covered approximately 420,000 rifles. Training became the critical bottleneck. The M9A1 required technique fundamentally different from standard rifle marksmanship. Soldiers had to learn to estimate range and trajectory, compensate for wind, and most importantly, brace the rifle properly to avoid injury. Training bulletins from December 1943 reported 17 cases of soldiers suffering shoulder injuries from firing rifle grenades with improper technique. First Sergeant Robert Chen, 32, from San Francisco, serving with the 37th Infantry Division, developed a training protocol that became standard across the Pacific. His method involved starting soldiers with dummy grenades, weighted training rounds, and gradually progressing to live fire only after demonstrating proper Form 10 consecutive times. Chen's protocol reduced training injuries by 73% and improved first shot hit probability from 41% to 68%. But the real test came in combat, and here the M9A1 exceeded expectations in ways the Ordnance Department hadn't anticipated. On December 7th, 1943, exactly 2 years after Pearl Harbor, elements of the 1st Marine Division assaulted Japanese positions on Cape Gloucester, New Britain. Lieutenant Howard Walsh, 24, from Portland, Oregon, led a platoon-sized assault on a fortified ridgeline designated Hill 660. The Japanese had constructed interconnected cave positions along a 200-yard front, each cave supporting its neighbors with overlapping fields of fire. Walsh's platoon carried 36 M9A1 grenades. Over 4 hours of sustained combat, they systematically neutralized 11 separate cave positions without calling for artillery or air support. The technique was methodical: suppressive fire from bars and standard rifles, followed by rifle grenade strikes into each cave entrance. The shaped charges proved devastatingly effective in the confined spaces, with overpressure waves killing or incapacitating defenders who survived the initial blast fragmentation. Japanese tactical doctrine had no answer for this capability. Their defensive positions were designed on the assumption that American infantry could only engage them with direct fire weapons requiring line of sight, or with indirect fire weapons lacking precision. The M9A1 bridged that gap. It offered the precision of direct fire with the trajectory of indirect fire, delivered by every rifleman in the squad. Intelligence reports from captured documents revealed Japanese confusion and fear. One diary entry, recovered from a dead officer on Bougainville in January 1944, described the M9A1 as the skull cracker weapon because of the distinctive sound made by the shaped charge detonating inside cave systems. The overpressure wave would often cause fatal injuries without external wounds, catastrophic brain trauma from rapid pressure changes. Another captured document warned Japanese soldiers that the enemy can now shoot grenades from rifles like artillery. By February 1944, every infantry division in the Pacific Theater had received M9A1 allocation. Standard issue was 12 grenades per rifle squad, with company-level reserves of an additional 50 grenades. This seemingly modest number reflected both production constraints and tactical reality. The M9A1 was a specialized tool for specific problems, not a replacement for standard infantry weapons. Enemy countermeasures developed slowly. The Japanese began constructing cave entrances with sharp 90-degree turns immediately inside, hoping to deflect or contain the shaped charge blast. They increased the depth of defensive positions, moving personnel and equipment farther from entrances. Some units attempted to construct armored shutters for cave mouths, though the weight and material requirements made this impractical at scale. None of these measures proved particularly effective. The M9A1's shaped charge could penetrate or bypass most improvised armor, and the blast overpressure traveled around corners with lethal efficiency. What did work, occasionally, was early detection and suppressive fire against American soldiers in the exposed firing position required to launch rifle grenades. But this required the Japanese to reveal their positions, which typically resulted in them receiving even more grenade fire. The physics of the M9A1's effectiveness lay in its shaped charge design, an application of the Monroe effect discovered in the 1880s, but only effectively weaponized during World War II. The explosive charge was arranged in a hollow cone configuration with a copper liner, forming the inner surface. Upon detonation, the explosive force collapsed this liner, converting it into a superplastic jet of molten copper, traveling at approximately 25,000 feet per second. This hypervelocity jet could penetrate armor through a combination of kinetic energy and erosive action. The copper jet essentially drilled through steel, creating a focused point of catastrophic failure. Against 2 inches of homogeneous armor plate, the M9A1 could penetrate consistently at ranges up to 100 yards. Against reinforced concrete or coral, penetration varied based on material density, but averaged 18-24 inches. Inside caves and bunkers, the physics became even more brutal. The shaped charge would penetrate the entrance or wall, then the explosive force would expand into the confined space. With no room to disperse, the pressure wave amplified, often reaching 50-75 pounds per square inch within milliseconds. Human tissue, particularly air-filled organs like lungs and sinuses, cannot withstand such rapid pressure changes. Casualties from overpressure often showed no external injuries, but had suffered catastrophic internal trauma. The effective range of 195 yards represented a compromise between accuracy and safety. The M9A1's aerodynamics were poor compared to standard artillery projectiles. The folding fins provided some stability, but couldn't prevent tumbling, especially in crosswinds exceeding 15 miles per hour. Soldiers learned to compensate by aiming into the wind, though this required experience and judgment that couldn't be taught in training, only learned through repeated combat use. Barrel wear became a serious concern by March 1944. The M1 Garands barrel was designed for approximately 10,000 rounds of standard ammunition, before accuracy degraded noticeably. Firing rifle grenades accelerated this wear pattern. Each M9A1 launch imposed thermal and mechanical stress, equivalent to approximately 50 standard rounds. A rifle that fired 100 grenades would experience wear similar to 5,000 standard rounds. Ordnance Technical Bulletins from April 1944 recommended replacing barrels after firing 60 rifle grenades or after evidence of degraded accuracy, whichever came first. In practice, field armorers inspected barrels visually for heat stress cracks and erosion around the gas port. Barrels showing excessive wear were tagged for depot-level rebuild, though in forward areas, they were often simply swapped with barrels from damaged rifles. The reload cycle presented tactical vulnerabilities. After firing an M9A1, a soldier required approximately 30 seconds to clear the launcher, reload the rifle with a standard en-bloc clip, and prepare a second grenade. During this window, he was essentially defenseless. Squad tactics evolved to address this. Typically, at least 2 soldiers in each squad would carry M9A1 grenades and alternate fire, ensuring continuous coverage. Misfires occurred in approximately 2% of launches, usually caused by fouled gas ports in the grenade's tail section. Soldiers learned to clean these ports meticulously before loading using wire brushes or even grass stems in field conditions. A misfire typically meant the grenade remained seated on the launcher without detonating. Clearing procedures required extreme caution, removing a potentially armed grenade from the launcher without triggering the fuse. Technical Sergeant Marcus Thompson, 29, from Detroit, Michigan, serving as an armorer with the 6th Army, developed a clearing procedure that became standard. Rotate the rifle to point the grenade skyward, gently tap the launcher collar to disengage the locking mechanism, and allow the grenade to slide off under its own weight. If the grenade wouldn't clear, mark the rifle as unsafe and turn it over to ordnance personnel. Thompson's procedure prevented at least 7 documented accidents between March and June 1944. Environmental factors affected performance significantly. In the tropical rain common across the Pacific, wet propellant could reduce launch velocity by up to 20%, shortening effective range proportionally. Soldiers learned to keep ammunition dry, but this was nearly impossible in sustained jungle operations. Some units reported coating cartridges with light oil or storing them in rubber prophylactic sleeves, the same waterproofing technique used for matches and cigarettes. The shaped charge's effectiveness decreased against certain materials. Dense volcanic basalt, common on islands like Iwo Jima, sometimes deflected the copper jet without full penetration. Coral limestone, conversely, proved particularly vulnerable. The porous structure allowed the pressure wave to propagate through interconnected voids, extending the lethal radius beyond the 20-foot specification. Japanese reports captured after the war revealed that their own testing of captured M9A1 grenades yielded mixed results. They understood the shaped charge principle. Similar technology was used in their Type 99 magnetic anti-tank mine, but lacked the manufacturing precision to replicate the M9A1's performance. Several attempts to develop a Japanese rifle grenade for the Type 38 or Type 99 rifles failed due to metallurgical limitations and insufficient propellant development. Production of the M9A1 rifle grenade ceased in August 1945, immediately following Japan's surrender. Total wartime production reached 4.21 million units, of which approximately 2.8 million were actually shipped to combat theaters. The remainder sat in stateside arsenals, where they remained in storage through the late 1940s. The Korean War saw limited use of remaining M9A1 stocks, though by 1950 the grenades were considered obsolescent. Many had degraded in storage. Tropical environments had accelerated chemical breakdown of the explosive, and fuse mechanisms had corroded. Reliability dropped to approximately 75%, unacceptable for frontline ammunition. By 1952, the majority of remaining M9A1 inventory was condemned and destroyed through controlled detonation at various proving grounds. The M9A1 was officially replaced by the M31 Heat, high-explosive anti-tank rifle grenade in 1953, designed for use with the M1 Garand, but featuring an improved shaped charge and more reliable fuse. The M31 incorporated lessons learned from the M9A1's combat use, including a longer standoff distance for better armor penetration and a more aerodynamic body for improved accuracy. But the real legacy of the M9A1 wasn't its replacement. It was the tactical concept it proved. The rifle grenade demonstrated that individual riflemen could effectively engage targets beyond hand grenade range without requiring specialized weapons or extensive training. This concept would evolve through successive generations of infantry weapons. The M79 grenade launcher, introduced in 1961 for use in Vietnam, was a direct descendant of the rifle grenade concept. Though it used a dedicated launcher rather than attaching to a rifle, it filled the same tactical niche, giving individual soldiers organic indirect fire capability. The M2SO3 grenade launcher, mounted under M16 rifles starting in 1969, brought the capability full circle by integrating it directly into the standard infantry rifle. Modern rifle grenade systems still see use in militaries worldwide, though American forces abandoned them in favor of dedicated grenade launchers. The French APV-40 and the Israeli Rephaim rifle grenades serve similar roles to the M9A1, proof that the concept remains valid 8 decades later. Classification and secrecy never shrouded the M9A1. It was considered standard ordnance, not a special weapon. Technical manuals and training films from the 1940s remain publicly available through military archives. What did remain classified until the 1970s were certain after-action reports detailing specific incidents involving civilian casualties. The shaped charge's penetration capabilities, combined with the difficulty of visually identifying cave systems that might contain non-combatants, led to several documented cases of friendly fire and civilian deaths. These reports remained restricted until declassified under routine document review programs. Private First Class Michael Cordero survived the Bougainville campaign and continued fighting through the Philippines campaign of 1944-1945. His rifle, with its M7 launcher attachment, fired an estimated 43 M9A1 grenades across 18 months of combat. He was wounded twice, shrapnel from a Japanese knee mortar on Luzon in February 1945, and minor burns from a flamethrower backwash in April 1945. Cordero returned to the United States in October 1945, carrying his rifle home as a war trophy, a common practice despite official regulations. He stored it in a closet in his Albuquerque home for 32 years before donating it to the National World War II Museum in 2003. The rifle showed clear signs of the stress imposed by repeated grenade launches, heat discoloration on the barrel, wear on the gas cylinder, and hairline cracks in the stock near the butt plate. Sergeant James Kowalski was killed on December 14, 1943, during fighting on Bougainville, not by enemy action, but by an accidental detonation of stored ammunition. He was 28 years old. His name appears on the Manila American Cemetery Memorial Wall. First Sergeant Robert Chen, who developed the training protocols for rifle grenade use, survived the war and remained in the Army through the Korean conflict. He retired as a command sergeant major in 1963 and spent his retirement years teaching high school physics in San Jose, California. Chen passed away in 1994 at age 83. In his papers, donated to the Stanford University Library, researchers found detailed notes on the physics of rifle grenade trajectories, including hand-drawn diagrams, calculating optimal launch angles for various ranges, the kind of fieldcraft that saved lives but never appeared in official manuals. Veterans who used the M9A1 in combat rarely spoke about it specifically in their post-war recollections. It was simply another tool, another weapon in the arsenal. But when interviewed by military historians in the 1980s and 1990s as part of various oral history projects, many mentioned the relief they felt when rifle grenades became available. The ability to engage cave positions without having to call in artillery, which might not be available or might not be accurate enough, meant fewer situations where the only option was frontal assault. Lieutenant Howard Walsh, who led the Cape Gloucester assault, received the Silver Star for his actions on December 7, 1943. He survived the war, returned to Portland, and worked as a civil engineer. Walsh maintained contact with several members of his platoon through annual reunions until his death in 1987. At his funeral, 3 former Marines served as pallbearers. They were men whose lives he had arguably saved by using rifle grenades rather than ordering a direct assault on Hill 660. The men who died in caves destroyed by M9A1 grenades, Japanese soldiers following orders, defending positions they'd been told to hold at all costs, left their own stories. Some were found with diaries detailing the terror of fighting an enemy who could shoot explosives into their shelters. Others left letters never sent, photographs never delivered. The shaped charge that killed them was indifferent to their humanity, as all weapons are indifferent. The men who fired those grenades carried that knowledge for the rest of their lives. The M9A1 rifle grenade represents what happens when tactical necessity meets engineering ingenuity. It was never a wonder weapon, never a war winner, never the subject of propaganda films or magazine features. It was simply a tool that solved a specific problem. How do you destroy a fortified position without getting your men killed? The answer, let them shoot grenades from rifles, seems obvious in hindsight. But developing that answer required engineers to solve complex ballistic problems, manufacturers to produce millions of precision components under wartime constraints, and soldiers to master new techniques under combat stress. It required men like Michael Cordero, pressing against volcanic soil in pre-dawn darkness, trusting their lives to a weapon they'd only fired 3 times in training. If this story of innovation under pressure resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're exploring more forgotten weapons and tactics that shaped World War II. The tools and techniques that don't make Hollywood movies, but won real battles. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, or if any of your family served in the Pacific Theater. Their stories matter, their innovations matter, and to the men who stood in exposed positions, braced rifles against the ground, and fired explosives into darkness toward enemies who wanted to kill them, we remember. The M9A1 might be obsolete, but the courage it took to use it never will be.